good late Thursday or like Friday meteorologist Casey Cloud here in Northern right now, giving a look at those temperatures across the region. This late hour, early hour, however you want to describe it. You see there the 50s on the board. I know a little bit warmer than what we would generally expect this time of year. What a contrast from earlier last week where we had those 20s on the board in some spots. Just absolutely, a huge differential between, really the afternoon highs in the 80s and what we had those lows last week. Some spots in toward the mid 20s. It's crazy to see this, differential here across the region. Something we've been keeping our eyes on. We don't have the logo red, but we have a couple interesting things to talk about in terms of the weather. I know the weather's pretty nice, but we do have serious drought concerns, unfortunately. We have some fog concerns tonight, and actually the third thing, Roy, there is a small risk of some strong storms here and there towards Saturday and then toward next week, Wednesday and Thursday here locally, but they're going to be very isolated. So just, two things that are top of mind here, but then a third thing that is going to be a concern for a few of us, but most of us will be all right with the strong storm threat. Most won't get much rain at all. We need the rain. We'll take the rain, as long as we're not getting anything too damaging here, because we really need that precip so badly across our vicinity here, across the region. It's just so important because our drought is getting worse and worse here as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I know we really have to be very cognizant of that here as we look ahead. But you see dense fog right now, quite a few different reports of that there. We get out towards Cecil Field, an eighth of a mile visibility. We're in Duval County, Fernandina Beach, an eighth of a mile over toward Brunswick, McKinnon Airport, an eighth of a mile, a fourth of a mile, Brunswick, Glencoe, Perry there in Taylor County, a fourth of a mile, and then Tallahassee, a fourth of a mile, Quincy, eighth of a mile, and then down toward Flagler County, eighth of a mile. So that's as far as you can see there. Really reduced visibility. Not a good situation with that. If we have smoke, if there are some lingering, fires around as we're looking here, because we're starting to get some reports here and there, some brush fires and spots. That could be an issue. We had a different kind of fire late Wednesday night in Tallahassee, student apartment fire there, displacing quite a few folks and causing multiple injuries. My thoughts and prayers go to everybody impacted by that. That was near Florida State University. So, some Florida State University students being impacted by that. Just absolutely awful to hear about there a week before Thanksgiving in toward the Big Bend region there as we're looking and as we're tracking things. Luckily I didn't spread because, it could have, but always got to be watching out. Any of the smoke, we had a situation years ago, over a decade ago, where I-75 in Paynes Prairie where smoke and fog mixed, and it was a very tragic outcome where we had many fatalities with, just traffic accidents all over the place in the night. So, that was a while ago, but we just got to always watch out for stuff like that here as we're looking and as we're tracking, as we look ahead in the weeks and months to come potentially, because we're not expecting much rain, even if there is a chance of some strong storms here and there. Many of us are not going to get much rain. It's a give and take. We really need rain. If we could just get 2 inches for everybody, that still wouldn't help a lot, but it would kind of, push us off a little, because we now have, I'll say to you in a few minutes, we now have parts of our area closer toward Tallahassee under an exceptional, the worst of the worst type of drought. We haven't seen that in the ward Tallahassee area since 2011 and 2012. That's a long time ago, over a decade ago. I was still in high school then, and it's a situation where as we went into the ward that spring, we did, have some relief in the summer. I know we had Debbie, which really, that was a flood event, but we've got to be really careful here, because if we don't get relief here with the rain, we're going to have big problems. We're going to have big concerns here with wildfires if we don't get that precip here as we look ahead into the timeline. I don't want too much too quick, because that can be a big problem too, because the stores aren't as used to, absorbing that here initially. But we really need that rain. We're going to have wildfires here. It's just, it's a concern. The saying is, only you can prevent wildfires according to forestry and the like, and that's very much the case. Gotta be very careful. Do not be throwing cigarette butts out there, because all of a sudden in these really dry conditions, especially as we get in the months ahead, if it does go the way it's looking like it's going to go, that could really be a spark for something. And, it's your responsibility not to do that. I mean, if something you do causes a forest fire, depending on the intent, you can be held civilly and or, if it was intentional or even unintentional in a way, depending on what happens, you could even be held criminally liable, and you could, face a very serious criminal charges. So, this is very serious stuff we're talking about in terms of fires, very serious. It can impact lives here as we're looking at those dew points. We look at these temperature to know. We really get concerned when the winds get up and the dew points are lower, the humidity lower, and the like. I know that it feels better when there's low humidity, but when we have low humidity and we have these warmer temperatures, we have wind sometimes, and then we have just the dry soils here. That's going to be a problem. So you got to be very, very cognizant here of what's going on as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So I wouldn't be surprised. I know some areas already have burn bans. Some of them always, have burn bans year-round here, depending on where you are. But I know Bradford, there was some talk. They're considering it from what I've seen here and some different reporting. Let me double-check because we're live. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I don't know they announced anything in the middle of the night here. We're on live at 2 a.m. on your Friday, but I know they put a comment on Facebook there on a Thursday their afternoon that they've been discussing regarding a burn ban with the Florida Forest Service for Bradford County recently. However, at this time there's no ban in place, but officials are monitoring it daily and up to the community if one is put into effect. I would be surprised if we don't have one pretty soon, because there's a lot of concern here about these fires. Of course, that's one cause. Just the fires, people burning stuff getting out of hand, that can be an issue. I mean, there's lightning. If we get lightning in a storm and we don't get much rain, that can be an issue here too. So, I mean, just looking at the Bradford County Fire Rescue page on that Thursday, there was a brush fire there around Hayes Avenue in the county. They, reminded everybody to use extreme caution when burning, as dry conditions can lead to a wildfire very quickly. And then there's another issue north and west of Brooker, around southwest 195th Avenue on that Thursday in Bradford. So we really got to be careful with this stuff because, as conditions are expected to worsen, we could have bigger and bigger concerns, in terms of the wildfire threat. Now, in terms of the precip, we need precip. There actually is a low-end risk of some strong and severe storms or even a brief tornado in this green area. It's the lowest risk, but it could happen here or there. We have had a couple spotty, pretty much as a way to describe it, tornado warnings in North Texas here on this Thursday night, and some isolated severe weather right now. No active warnings out that way. I can change at a moment's notice, but I know as we get north that Friday, there's a small severe risk. Hattiesburg, Jackson, Meridian, Columbus, Dartville, Tupelo, Oxford, Corinth there, Huntsville, Birmingham, up toward Cookville, Nashville. So it's a pretty broad area, pretty big area, but tornado threat pretty low, but not zero. You see the wind risk, you see the marginal risk. There's actually some flooding concerns in Southern California right now. Hopefully it won't be as bad as what some of the models were showing last week, for further on, but we had some issues last weekend, but we expected to have some more issues this week. We have had some, but right now, Orange County, there's a flash flood warning in effect, but this is life-threatening for some of those areas there. But right now, you don't see much more precip as we see the rain totals. Just a couple inches can cause problems out there in a short period of time. As we're looking there, not far from Huntington Beach, it's pretty popular area. I mean, in the last 12 hours, just north of, where that center is marked. And let me put on our mapping. Yeah, it's right in Huntington Beach here, too. Some areas have seen about 4 inches of rain. So that's a concern there, it seems like, as we're looking toward that zone. But it's drying out some now. As we're giving you guys that information. We need rain here, though, in our area very badly. I know we were going to, it's weird because we're talking about the risk of some strong storms. I have to break in for a rogue warning, Saturday and or Wednesday into Thursday of next week, but yet, and that'd be for severe weather, but yet otherwise we're not expecting much rain at all. So anything that we get could actually become severe here. As we look ahead, if it starts to get up some upscale growth, I mean, passing shower is not going to do that, Roy, but otherwise, sometimes it can happen. We had probably a decade or so, maybe more ago now, we had a storm around Vita Austin, no clouded ground lightning, and yet it produced a tornado. So, yeah, things can be weird sometimes with this pattern. And And you see here as we get into ward, it's a Saturday. You see a few showers early on, but as we get toward about sunrise there on that Saturday, you see some areas of red. And in theory, it's not a big chance at all, but in theory, one or two of those could have a little bit of wind enhancement or very weak rotation and get us some type of severe polygon. A very low chance of a red box, which would be a tornado warning. It's weird, I know, because we're talking about a drought, we're not talking about much rain, but if we could get a few areas of isolated severe weather, it'd be mainly toward Tallahassee here. It wouldn't be much rain, probably less than 1/10 of an inch, overall for most areas. A few spots, maybe, get lucky and get a quarter, half inch, but then that's where the strongest storm action is. Hopefully we can get a quarter of that, but without any stuff meeting severe criteria as we look ahead later in Saturday. I don't really see that much around Stark at all. We need some stuff around here. Not severe weather, obviously, but we need, some precip here. There is a heightened concern as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. Trying to give you guys the very latest on what's going on as we're looking. Let me see if they've sent out the SPC date too. They probably won't outlook us. Yeah, they haven't, but there's a thunderstorm risk Tallahassee over through all of our South Georgia counties. General thunderstorm risk, which, with as little rain chances we have to watch. Just make sure we don't get anything that gets us a warning here. As we look, it's not going to be as big of a risk as what we had, going back a couple weekends ago on that Sunday where we had a bunch of warnings. South Georgia popping up on us. We're a little bit closer to the timeline than we were with the update going back 2 weeks for that. But we could have a few warnings, so it's not a big deal overall, but a few spots could get a nasty storm when thunder roars go indoors. But it's odd because, again, most spots aren't going to even see rain. And we need the rain very, very, very badly here, folks. We're going to have wildfire problems. I'm just telling you that right now. I mean, just be ready, Be thinking about what you're going to do if you have a wildfire in your area here. There's a few of our areas in our zone that are at a lower risk than others, but, most of our counties that have a very heightened concern right now. And that's probably going to worsen in the weeks and months to come. Maybe even in the spring where it could get even worse if we don't get precip here. So just be thinking about what you need to do if you have to evacuate even in the weeks and months to come. Hopefully it's not going to be something immediate. Maybe we'll get lucky. We'll get a bunch of rain that doesn't, cause flash flooding for most, but get enough to really change the soil pattern because otherwise we're going to have problems as we look ahead here. I hate to be negative. I feel like we don't want to be negative on, everything here because the weather's pretty nice. Trying to enjoy it, but you got to be thinking about, could have air quality concerns even if we start getting fired, all over the place. And we really could honestly use a weak tropical system with rain and not much else, a few inches, but that's not going to happen. It doesn't look like, luckily, after what we've had with all these devastating hurricanes the last couple of years in our area, 23 and 24, the Dahlia with of course Helene. We got lucky here in terms of that here in 2025. So that's the positive. I doubt we'll have anything else, especially through November 30th. Past the season in December, if we had a rogue storm, you get one of these names. January, that list starts over, even though the official season doesn't start until next June. But hurricane season is pretty much over here in 2025 for our area, it would seem. But tropical climatology here, you can see it's becoming lower and lower of a chance of that as we get into where December is not zero, but a lower chance. Of course, Kate there, that 40th anniversary here. It's been 40 years, folks, as we're looking ahead now, coming up. As we look ahead toward tonight. What a terrible storm that was, and that's still the hurricane of record there. Based on my analysis, tropical cyclone of record, the worst one any time of year since 1950 for Tallahassee, for Cairo, Overlord, Thomasville, Moultrie, and Tipton. So crazy to think about because these others were earlier, by a good margin in the year. Speak of hurricane season, Dora, Irma, Matthew, October, Michael, October. As we're looking and as we're tracking things, Helene was later in September, but, Alberto is July. You get the idea. Kate was that outlier here and still remains that in terms of the worst tropical cyclones by county since 1950. Now, in terms of the drought monitor, though, this is what I was alluding to in terms of now they upgraded this on Thursday. Did the folks in charge of this, you can see now exceptional drought. That's the worst kind of drought they can put on these maps. for parts of Gadsden, Leon, Jefferson, Madison counties there in North Florida. But an extreme drought goes all the way into Union County now, and Baker, most of Columbia, most of Suwannee, all of Hamilton here. You can just see what we're talking about with this. Severe drought goes all the way through Gilchrist now and into Alachua. Bradford's still in what we call moderate drought, but if we don't get rain quickly, that's going to worsen rapidly as we look ahead in the timeline. St. John's and Flagler are, very lucky compared to everybody else with this, as they're not in any drought. It's crazy how that is. I know, going back, you think, talking about Caden 85. Well, another instance in 1985, as we look back, and we don't talk about this too much on here, but there were wildfire situations breaking out in Flagler County in May of 1985 there, where many homes are destroyed. So we're not seeing a situation like that here, at least, as we're tracking things, because they're in a pretty good spot with this right now. One of the few spots in our viewing circle where they're sitting pretty good with a drought index. Of course, Volusia had terrible flooding, as we're looking in the vicinity down toward Lake County here, and Brevard and the like here recently. More Lake and Brevard, but you get the idea. They don't need the rain there. The west coast of Florida needs the rain here as we're tracking things. Oh, just really need that precip here, because you see the exceptional drought for Gadsden, Leon, Jefferson, Madison there in Florida. And again, extreme. So really, I know these numbers are 0 to 4, but let's just say a 5 out of 5 for worse, it's like a higher risk in an SPC outlook in a way. The worst thing you can have in terms of drought for parts of our area now, an extreme drought for Lake City and for into Baker County and Union County here. Again, we really need the precip very badly as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. Very few of us are in a good spot with this. Again, Flagler and St. John's, a little bit of Duval, southeast Duval, not a drought right now, which that's great news. Be a lot harder for a wildfire to really be, spreading and be, concerned here as we're looking ahead in the timeline now. This is something I don't think we've ever had to really sow on here, but we're probably going to be sowing it a lot here unless we get rain in the weeks and months to come. It's called the Keats-Byram Drought Index. The Florida Forest Service putting out this graphic here. It estimates dryness of soils. So I'm just adding some points to this. You got a remain alert for wildfires. Bradford there in the 550 to 599 range. That's not, just extreme yet, but it's getting there, unfortunately. And you see Leon already in the 650 to 699. Jefferson, Madison, Gadsden, Liberty. Drier the soil, the easier you're going to have, fires potentially spreading and doing damage, especially, as we get into, the spring potentially here. Many local zones, I know it's just November, but my point is, if we keep this going, this could be, a real serious situation this spring. I mean, even here in the winter as well, don't get me wrong, as we're looking ahead, as from fall into winter, could have that issue too, but I know it's just not a good trend. We kind of had a little bit of this in last, spring and the summer here this year, and then we got enough rain to kind of, dampen the concern for a while, but it's really creeping up. We don't have a lot of rainmakers here that are expected to bring us much precip in the weeks to come. The 12Z model only brings 1/10 of an inch over the next 2 weeks, so broadly on average to Tallahassee. I mean, if you get a stronger storm, maybe you get more. Yeah, so the risk of a lightning strike, though, in there. And Stark only a 300th of an inch in the next 2 weeks here. You can't really go further out than that with that, but the overall pattern doesn't look great for rain for months here. As we're looking ahead in the timeline, to be quite honest, folks in emergency management and fire departments, they need to be ready. Forest services, GIMPs are getting ready. Got to be prepared, got to be ready to, take action here if something crops up in terms of fire. I mean, they're doing that here in Bradford on that Thursday, getting things out. Tallahassee did that, with that terrible apartment fire. Things didn't spread out of control, it doesn't seem, but, just got to keep remaining alert as it could get even more volatile here. Concerned, hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully we just get rain and we don't get into what we could get into, because there have been some bad fire years around here, like 98, and let's just hope we don't get into a situation like that. Remember, only you can prevent wildfires here as we're looking ahead in the timeline. I know with that situation, it was really, as we were looking back in history in 1998, it was really as we got closer to like May and June where we had some of the worst. But a lot of years we can have fire danger really start to crop up on us in like March here as we look up. But it may even start earlier than that, depending on how warm we are, but how dry we are too. Maybe we'll get a bunch of fronts with some rain. Because if we can just get, some fronts, we don't want severe weather, but in a way, for the broad picture, we need some heavy rain. It's probably the only way we're going to get it is if you have some stronger storms in there, and this would help the overall thing because, tornadoes are really dangerous, but, wildfire situations are too here, and, think about what happened in 85 in Flagler County, where, it was 150 homes, I believe it was, based on what I was just looking at, lost in a wildfire situation there in May of 1985. We had the 98 wildfires there, run the risk here of folks getting trapped. And I know we're kind of getting, we don't want to get too much more into it because hopefully this isn't going to happen, and remember, only you can prevent them is what, it's up to you. It's your responsibility. It's your, if you see something, call immediately in, make sure this doesn't get out of hand because things can get out of hand very rapidly. Some of the days it'll be okay, probably with the wind. Other days, not so much. And sometimes even out of a line, of rain. If it's falling apart, you can have a lot of wind. We just got to be vigilant here. We just got to be prepared, to kind of nip things here in the bud, per se. To say that kind of, in a more broad sense here before things get out of hand, because there, is that concern. As we go ahead and look at that rainfall forecast here, not seeing much towards Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville on the averages. Tallahassee, maybe we will get upwards of a 1/10 of an inch in the next week. Euro so the next 2 weeks for that. We'll see. Maybe we'll get more than what we're expecting. Once we have, but it still hadn't been enough, obviously. Not near enough. We're in a huge deficit. I know we generally get in the 60 to 70 inch range a year of rainfall here on Stark, give or take. We're at just under 40 on my rain gauge for the year. We only have a month left. It's pretty, dry period on average. So, probably about 20 inches, give or take, doing that broadly, 20 to 25 inches off, unless we get a bunch of rain here for what we're supposed to be getting a calendar year. So, not what you want to hear, not what you want to see, obviously. Some spots are doing worse than that. Some a little bit better, obviously. Some getting too much, like in Brevard downstate. But as you see here, it's very unbalanced, which isn't helping either. We have had some flooding concerns in Texas on that Thursday. We had a flash flood emergency there. It was in the NWS San Angelo area of responsibility. And as you see here, North Texas on that Friday, some areas an inch, 2, 3 inches. Southeast Oklahoma there, North Texas, southwestern Arkansas next 7 days. You see Birmingham, some of those areas. North Georgia there, you see some rain. East Tennessee, some of these areas do need that precip here, some don't. As we're looking here in toward the broad picture, we need it more than almost anybody. Tallahassee, it's the worst type of drought you can have. And we're in November. This isn't the time of year to really have that either. That's the thing. If we keep getting this worse and worse, we're going to have real problems here once we get into early next year. If we don't somehow get a bunch of rain, we need these lines, these fronts here to have. We don't want severe weather. Granted, it probably happened that way if you had this, but we need some heavy downpours here. Maybe we just get some cut off lows to come through. Don't have much of a severe risk somehow. Granted, some of those can, but we just need some rain somehow, some way to come through. We had a deluge, I guess 2023, like 4 or 5 inches there in December. It caused some flooding, some concerns that way. But if we could get some of that, that would really be helpful, to be quite honest. It was a December deluge, I think I put it. I hope we get something like that. We don't want, the adverse consequences, but we're going to have bigger problems if we don't take care of this now with some precip somehow. And we're going to have, that concern as we look ahead. So, just got to be careful. Clutter.com/radar Internet to look at things, but there's not going to be much to look at here for most of us. Again, it's weird to say that even though we don't have much rain in the forecast, could have a few strong storms out Saturday and then Wednesday into Thursday, though. As we look, especially toward Tallahassee and then towards west south central Georgia, let's start on Stark at this point. Maybe it'll change some. We need it to change for the rain, not for the severe weather in terms of, damaging one guy's tail or a brief tornado. But Georgia, your drought index is a disaster here as well, to be quite honest. I mean, to be blunt about it, exceptional drought there. Parts of Decatur, Grady, you see into Thomas County there. You kind of get the idea. Not a good situation as we're tracking things. Not good here as we look at this information. Hopefully, things really get taken care of with precip. But you have an extreme drought, through Waycross, and about Hosta, and just this is not what you want to see, obviously. Up toward the Albany area as well. This is not a good picture here that we're seeing. I think it was 07, we had big fires as well around, and it really can get going early in the calendar years, so probably, maybe not, it could happen some in 25, but if we don't get the rain by early 26, it's probably going to really become an issue quick on us here. And, again, we want to just warn everybody, but you got to be careful here, too, because, and I probably emphasize it more in a way, in a way that I should, I guess, because unlike, severe weather here, damaging winds and the like, you can always be prepared, but, and try to prepare, and you see it on the models, it's coming, we're seeing that, but with this, in terms of the drought situation, Melissa's folks, unfortunately, can kind of play a role in this, and cause this to be worse by committing arson and committing very serious crimes here that are punishable by very long prison sentences here. So that's the thing. It's a give and take, and we just gotta hope that people that are on the positive side of things here are the ones kind of taking action, and people that are causing trouble stay away from this. And then we, except for lightning, we probably, we're in a better spot. Some folks, their fires just can get away. That's one thing compared to just, downright arson, which can and has happened before in the area. Unfortunately, according to what I've read in media reports over the years and decades. But as we go ahead and look here on a more positive note now, your high school football forecast. 2A playoffs here. Berkeley Prep Buccaneers at Bradford County Tornadoes. A 5-4 Berkeley Prep there. They're from the Tampa area. They haven't lost in a while. They lost, I think, 4 straight to start the year. Bradford had only lost 1. That was up there, against Mandarin. They're really, a tough team in a higher classification. So it's a game that may be closer than some of Bradford's games here have been lately. Mostly clear, a little warmer than last week. Middle 60s, just a 5% chance of rain here. A light wind. Might need that light jacket. Not as big of a deal, but a jacket as last week, though. But still might be a little bit cool, especially later in the game. But, it shouldn't be too bad. It's pretty good football weather. That's one thing out of all this here. Even though we're above average, we need rain. We were thinking we might have some for Friday night. Lights, talking about it last week for this week. Well, that's not going to be the case now. We're looking good for that for our area here. Saturday could be, where we have some as we showed you in the model. But Friday looks pretty good. Just a very, very small chance. Just trying to kind of be on, that's probably overdoing it for our area here around Stark. Maybe our western counties, but, 5-10%. Putting that in there just in case. But really to be dry for it, which is good news for the game for folks to enjoy, for that at least. Again, we need rain otherwise. So as we go ahead and see Fox safety tips, we do have some of that around, so that is something here. This pattern, there is some different moisture factors in play to create that at least. And, there are some of those, but hazardous driving conditions due to low visibility. We already have some of these alerts in place for some of our counties, so slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination. Make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlight, and leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you. I know we just gotta be cognizant of all this here. We have all those different games too, and if people are out really late, we'll have to just see, how the fog impacts travel. Some spots may have it earlier on, other spots would probably be pretty late though with that fog. But as you see here, early in the morning too. Ohio State I have for my rankings here. I know we didn't have our Tuesday update. We'll be on Tuesday coming up. Probably going to be up next Thursday, Thanksgiving night, but it'll be on Tuesday. We'll have another one of these here, updated look at things after the games this weekend. FSU, Florida, neither one anywhere, to be found here on this. But as you see here, Indiana, they're number 2 in my ranking. That's what the committee has. Fernando Mendoza, very, very impressive. Julian Sayed, number 1 for Ohio State. Georgia's an interesting one. The committee has them lower because they did have that one loss to Alabama. But their, quarterback play there has been really, really impressive there. And even though they're not the SEC champ here, I have them. You can do this year. Tech, in a way, I mean, it may not work out like this, but, I have them higher. I think they're better than Texas A&M. Texas A&M was down by a wide margin and barely come back at home to beat South Carolina. They barely came back at home to beat the Gamecocks. They're a very bad team, so they needed, a lot of luck and, effort at home in the second half to be one of the worst teams in the conference there in the SEC. So I don't even have them given them a bye anymore, even though they haven't lost. Now, if they, win their last game, like against Texas, win the SEC champions, they'll probably bump them back into the top 4 like what the committee has. But we'll see. I think Texas Tech has been really impressive. I know they lost one game, but they were out their star quarterback, Baron Morton. They're really, really impressive there. The Red Raiders from the Big 12. Oregon, they're a team where I may have them too high, but they've only lost one game with Indiana. It was at home. We'll see how things go there. I mean, Ole Miss almost lost to Washington State. Notre Dame has 2 losses here. C.J. Carter has been really impressive since. I have them at home against Oklahoma. They upset Alabama. That's a big surprise. I have BYU still in here. They only have 1 loss, and it was Texas Tech. It was on the road, a tough environment. They only have 1 loss, just like Georgia Tech. Even though if we had like the top 12 without it being, we have to have designated slots that have Alabama at 11 here, ahead of Georgia Tech, but below BYU. Georgia Tech almost lost to Boston College, but I would have them in right now as the ACC champ. And North Texas, I mean, Green there is my group of 5, group of 6, whatever you want to say, champion here. Technically, you can have 2 of them if the ACC team isn't strong enough, but probably not going to be the case in that regard. We see Alabama, most people wouldn't have it like this, but I have them out right now. Just haven't done enough. I mean, we lost FSU on the road, but in Oklahoma at home. If they went out, they're probably in. Auburn's their, big game on the schedule here. If they win that, well, they get in. I would think, in my assessment, they're already in according to the committee. But if not, then you just never know what could happen. In terms of that, if they don't win that, they probably aren't going to get in, would not get in. But Ty Simpson's done a good job with that team, a really good job. Of course, you have Gunnar Stockton at Georgia, but 2 losses there. I mean, they already lost there, at home to Oklahoma and John Mateer. I mean, Notre Dame is on a huge winning streak. They're on an 8-game winning streak. I think it'd be, since those 2 losses to Texas A&M and Miami early on. I know Miami is a very controversial thing there. Because, a lot of people want to put Miami ahead of Notre Dame, but just don't see it. They really, Carson back, that team kind of fell apart there for a stretch in a couple games. And if they went out, maybe they get in, but I think Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame beat them, there's some calculations, and I know FSU, we've talked about it a lot. They deserve to be in 23. We've said that many times on here. Obviously, undefeated from my school. That's not the reason to be in my school, but it was obvious. They should have been in 23. They probably would have won the whole thing if they'd have been in. But anyway, the point is, Miami, Notre Dame there, the discussion with that is there's some calculations and computer modeling. Because it was at Miami, give them almost a 4-point advantage. They only won by 3, so in a way, Notre Dame is still the better team there in that. Florida State never get a big game early in the year, won by like multiple touchdowns against LSU. So it's a big difference here. The calculation says Notre Dame may have still been the better team, even if they played their first, the first game with a brand new quarterback there that never played before. They didn't win, but the computer actually counts them as winning because it was a neutral site. Notre Dame may have won by a point or something. I know it's a little weird, but it's a way to say it there. I think Notre Dame deserves to be where they are in my rankings, and they're in the committee's rankings as well, ahead of Miami. Virginia there, we'll see what happens. Tony Elliott's squad had that injured quarterback there. They lost that game. That put them right behind the 8 ball, but they still have a chance to win the ACC. USC there, Lincoln Riley, a huge game against Oregon. If they win that one, they get in consideration. Oregon with 2 losses might be right. They might get knocked completely out And USC gets right on the edge of getting in, maybe like just below Alabama or something. We'll see. Vandy, I haven't been impressed with all year, even though they only have 2 losses. They just, I don't know, they lost to Alabama. They lost very badly, in terms of how that game was going against Texas. They were down by a wide margin. They did come back at the end. They just haven't impressed me this year at all. Have the Commodores there, to be quite honest. A lot of folks have them higher than that, but I just don't really see it with them. I mean, that Alabama game wasn't close. I mean, it was a 16-point differential. The Texas game wasn't close until they come back at the end. They barely beat Auburn. I mean, Auburn, they didn't even their coach anymore in that one, did they? Or was that the last game for that coach? I can't remember at this point because, looking at different things there. It was a new coach, and they barely won that against the Auburn team with an interim coach. They barely beat LSU, who ended up getting rid of their coach. Barely beat Missouri. I mean, that's a quarterback issue from Missouri in that game. Yeah, Vanderbilt, I mean, they have 2 losses. They're in a pretty tough conference, obviously. The one that I have the most teams in out of. I know you think about what happened with FSU. Since then, more of the top players have gone to the SEC and Big Ten. So even if the ACC was, more comparable back then, not anymore. Decision, a lot of players, they're humans, obviously, that make decisions. They see a team gets left out, hadn't lost, and they don't want to have that happen to themselves. They're going to go to the school, in the conference, where that doesn't happen as much, based on, the process, whether it's, it shouldn't be like that, obviously, but that's what's happening here. So even if the ACC was comparable to the SEC and Big Ten back then, not really the case anymore after what happened with FSU in 2023 in terms of the overall recruiting talent. Sadly, here, that's just how it's played out. The Big 12 still kind of in and on Texas Tech, getting some really good players, but, that's about it here at this point in terms of some real stiff competition. Notre Dame, too, but they're not in the conference. So they're in the ACC and the other sports, but not in football. They need to be in the ACC and football. That helped things a lot for the ACC, but probably not going to happen. Maybe it will. Anyway, let's go ahead and see that planning forecast here. A little rain for most as a drought expected to worsen here for areas. We've alluded to a lot, but a few very isolated spots could see strong storms on Saturday and then Wednesday into Thanksgiving. So it's just give and take. A lot of us have a pretty nice, period here with not much rain, but we need the rain. And then Thanksgiving actually could be pretty cloudy here. Be cooler though, closer to average for the high. And, by then, some of the models still say some storms in the morning, by the afternoon clearing out, but a lot of this could be more isolated. But where they are happening, we could have a yellow box pop up as a thunderstorm warning, or even, if there's enough of a spin, maybe even a tornado warning, red box on our map. So we'll see how that plays out. It's weird to even talk about it like that. I don't know how much of a rain chance, but if we get something, it could be severe. That's kind of the storyline. The bigger chance of being our western counties, Tallahassee, Leon County, Thomasville, Thomas County, Bainbridge, Decatur County. You kind of get the idea. Doherty County, Albany, Quitman County there, in towards southwest Georgia as well. So that's kind of the storyline. Seminole County, of course, you have Donaldsonville. You kind of get you understand what I'm saying. So this kind of storyline here as we're tracking things. Let me see if there's any questions or comments for any of the viewers here watching late tonight with us on the live stream. Folks watching, I see a Mike watching there on YouTube. Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me here. We're giving you guys all the latest here on different platforms as we're looking ahead here and giving you guys the very latest. So, in terms of the drought, I don't mean to scare anybody, but I'm just concerned here. Just be prepared. Preparation can really help. I mean, the more prepared you can be for that wildfire threat, the better off you'll be here. But obviously some stuff can just get out of hand and there's not much you can do. But it's different than like a tornado coming through. I mean, there's also just different things you can do around your house to keep that vegetation cut, that's drawn out and the like to prevent the wildfires from spreading here, and just, try to just get rid of stuff that, is that bigger hazard there. Just be really, cautious. Just really try to be prepared for, the dry conditions here and that soil getting even drier here. We got to just hope for the best with that. But, I mean, we saw pretty much everybody did what happened in California in January. And, you know, wouldn't think it would get to that level here, but just still got to be very careful. Got to be very prepared, because that was something where we actually had a lot of fatalities because things happen so quick. You know, there's different things that go into wildfires, and the preparation is key here. You know, hopefully we can kind of get things, you know, the control burns happen a lot around here. Try to mitigate some of that ahead of time, so that's really important. You know, just really try to have things in a better state here in terms of, you know, the wildfire. You don't want too much untapped, you know, potential here in terms of wildfire fuel, because that can be an issue here. Some of the hurricanes coming through, some of that still remains, I would think. So, you know, folks do a great job here with the different, you know, groups in general getting ready, but just gotta always, you know, just, you know, send out a reminder again from that meteorological perspective. So, again, gonna go and wrap it up for tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. I know Thanksgiving travel is coming up soon. Gonna have that weather player come in that's giving cool air, you know, middle of the country, even more of a cool down, and what we're gonna be seeing here locally, obviously. As we look ahead right now, you see it's just kind of, you know, not a huge weather pattern in terms of craziness here in Missouri, Arkansas. There's a small risk of some severe weather in that, but, you know, so remain alert. There's some light in northeast Texas that looks like it's kind of noteworthy there, and we'll be watching that weather pattern middle next week. I know some of the models show different things as we look ahead there and toward the timeline. I know we have that current lighting on. Let me turn that off. Let me go to the GFS here. I know Euro's been doing a better job here lately, but this is the one we can put in our system. So today is 21st. The 25th is that Tuesday here. Let me put this in the winter mode here too. And then you'll kind of see the progression. This is into that Wednesday when people are traveling a lot. Could have some rain, you know, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana. Some of this could be even heavy here at times, even some stronger storms maybe in that mixed in. As you look here, this is just one perspective. Just a lot of people on the roads too. As you see some of that rain coming into our area, I know it looks like more than we're probably going to actually get though. Here early Thursday, you see it kind of start to break up though, and then as you look toward like some of these areas, Missouri, some cool air 40s during the day up there in that dark green. The light greens 50s during the day, yellow 60s, oranges may get into the 70s here as we look ahead in terms of that temperature forecast on Thanksgiving Day. And as we look ahead even further, you know, toward that Black Friday, you see it's pretty dry around here. Some of the models have been showing some snow up toward Missouri. Flurries still possible, but we're not really seeing that right now in the modeling with this. So it could be dry but cold toward Missouri at this point. Some of the areas in the heartland as we look ahead in toward that timeline. So that's kind of the storyline there. You know, for them, it's not really cold, but below freezing is pretty chilly. You know, for people maybe traveling from out of town, out of state, and the like. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. I'll be back here late Tuesday, early Wednesday with more, unless we need to pop back in sooner. Thanks so much for tuning in, trusting me. Have a great night.